The film begins by showing the planet named Yaoa Prime. Apparently, the planet is inhabited by a clan of predators called the Yaoa. Following this, a predator named Dek fights his older brother Quay as a test. Despite trying his best, Dek fails to defeat Quay. In Quay's opinion, Dek lost because he fought while being dominated by his anger. Time moves on until Dek and Quay chat inside a spaceship. It turns out Dek lost one of his fangs while trying to save Quay. Soon after, Dek prepares to undertake the traditional Yaoa hunt so that he can prove his strength and be worthy of becoming a clan member. This tradition requires the participant to bring back their prey. Dek then sets the destination of his ship so that it can fly automatically to Genna. Apparently, Genna is a planet inhabited by a monster named Kalisk that cannot be killed. Dek recklessly chooses Kalisk as his hunting target because he is ready to risk his life to prove himself. A moment later, Dek and Quay welcome the arrival of their father, Nyor, who has been the leader of the Yaoa clan. Nyor then discusses the Yaoa rule, where weak clan members must be executed. Unexpectedly, Dek is declared a weak member because his body is considered small for a predator. Nyor refuses to give Dek a chance to prove himself, convinced that his son will fail in the hunting tradition. Nyor finally orders Quay to execute Dek. In the process, however, Quay betrays him and uses all his abilities to save Dek. Thanks to Quay's help, Dek finally manages to escape on his ship and head towards Genna. Meanwhile, Quay ends up being executed by Njor for defying his father's command. As it approaches the planet Genna, Dek's ship slowly becomes damaged due to atmospheric pressure. For his safety, Dek is forced to make an emergency landing without his ship. When the time is right, Dek is determined to conquer Kalisk to honor Quay's sacrifice. As he begins hunting Kalisk, Dek is attacked by a plant-like monster. Dek then fights desperately to defeat the monster. But in the end, Dek chooses to flee because the monster is too difficult to fight. While continuing his hunt, Dek enters an area of thorny plants. Soon after, a monster, which we will call Dragon, uses the plant to prey on Dek. Now, in the same location, there is a woman named Thea who is trapped in a monster's nest. Thea then activates her translator feature so she can communicate in the Yaoa language. From there, Thea informs Dek that the plant's thorns contain a poison that can paralyze movement. Thea concludes that Dragon wants to incapacitate Dek using the thorns. As Dragon attacks aggressively, Dek flees, trying to avoid the thorns. Dek then gets hit by a thorn and begins to have difficulty moving. Just before losing consciousness, Dek throws his weapon to Thea. As a result, Thea frees herself and immediately kills Dragon just as the monster is about to devour Dek. After that, Dek's condition slowly recovers, thanks to an antidote given by Thea. When they start talking, Thea admits she is a synth, an android robot, belonging to Weyland-Yutani, tasked with researching Genna. With her experience, Thea can confirm that the Genna environment is extremely lethal to humans. Thea also states that she has seen several predators hunt Kalisk, but none of them survived, and Dek might face the same fate. Despite her injured leg, Thea offers Dek a deal. Thea will show him Kalisk's location on the condition that Dek helps her retrieve her leg first. Dek initially refuses because Yaoa clan members adhere to the principle of hunting alone. However, Dek is eventually forced to agree because his prey tracker is damaged. After that, Dek starts carrying Thea toward the robot's destination. Dek uses a special device so that Thea remains attached to his back. Throughout the journey, Thea shares her extensive knowledge regarding the various creatures inhabiting Genna. During a rest stop, Thea recounts that she has been on Genna for 2 years. Along with her team, which includes Synth, Thea built a base for the research mission. One day, a team member named Tessa invites Thea to explore the nature of Genna, so Thea doesn't get bored working in the lab. It is then that Thea and Tessa are attacked by Kalisk, separating them. The same attack also causes Thea to lose one of her legs. The next day, Dek and Thea continue their journey. They then find a monster we will call Bull. After Thea informs him that Bull is Kalisk's prey, Dek is determined to hunt the same monster for food. However, Dek postpones his hunt upon realizing that the area Bull occupies is filled with sharp grass. It turns out Bull's body is resistant to the grass. Due to a small monster approaching Dek, Bull finally flees. Dek uses the surrounding trees to chase Bull without entering the sharp grass area. In this situation, the small monster, which we will call Bud, bothers Deck again, as if Bud wants Deck to fail the bull hunt. While fighting Bud, Deck is forced to divert his attention because Bull is constantly approaching. At the peak of this moment, Deck successfully kills Bull with a Yaoa sword that has a laser element. Soon after, Deck and Thea are attacked by another monster we will call Nightmare. Thanks to Bud's help, they both manage to escape. Afterwards, Nightmare shifts to hunting Bud. This situation creates an opening for Deck, allowing him to finally kill Nightmare. Deck then shares the meat of his hunted monster with Thea. However, Thea refuses, remembering she is a robot and doesn't need food. Meanwhile, Bud accepts the meat from Deck. Uniquely, Bud spits on Deck as a sign that he now considers Deck as family. However, Deck does not want to become emotionally attached to Bud. Meanwhile, Tessa, Thea's teammate, manages to escape and is undergoing recovery. Apparently, every synth in Thea's team is connected to the Weyland-Yutani network. Thanks to this network, Tessa can detect the presence of a Yaoa member on Genna, in this case, Deck. Tessa's system considers the Yaoa a threat to her mission. Once she has recovered, Tessa begins searching for Thea. In the process, Tessa and her team easily eradicate monsters thanks to their sophisticated weapons. Tessa then finds Deck's crashed ship on Genna. Upon entering the ship, Tessa accidentally finds a bomb capable of freezing its target's body. Sometime later, Deck and Thea finally arrive at their destination, which turns out to be Thea's team facility. The place is heavily damaged due to the Kalisk attack. Shortly after, Thea successfully finds her severed leg. Thea then uses the operational medical facility to reattach the leg to her body. While waiting for the recovery process, Deck demands Thea fulfill her promise to reveal Kalisk's location. Deck is then surprised because Thea has secretly called her team. Before her team arrives, Thea urges Deck to leave immediately. The reason is that Thea knows her team will kill Deck because the Yaoa are considered a threat to their mission. It turns out Weyland-Yutani tasked Thea's team with capturing Kalisk. Hence, from now on, Deck has to compete with Thea's team. Deck finally leaves Thea, feeling betrayed because Thea broke her promise to reveal Kalisk's location. While still near the base, Deck uses flammable materials to create a large explosion. Through this action, Deck successfully lures Kalisk to the location. Deck then fights desperately to kill Kalisk. Due to the effects of their fierce battle, Thea's leg recovery process is hindered. Thea then uses a weapon left by her team to fight Kalisk. Thanks to Thea's assistance, Deck is able to perform a series of actions until he finally decapitates Kalisk. However, Kalisk recovers quickly due to its super regeneration ability. Kalisk then manages to corner Deck and prepares to devour him. However, Kalisk finally lets Deck live because it smells Bud on Deck's body. Seconds later, Tessa arrives with the freezing bomb she stole from Deck's ship. Thanks to the Yaoa bomb, Tessa successfully captures both Kalisk and Deck. As time progresses, Deck wakes up to find himself detained by Tessa. It turns out, Tessa has been the leader of the synth operation to capture Kalisk all along. Tessa then declares that Deck is now Weyland-Yutani property, just like Kalisk, who is caged elsewhere. Afterward, Tessa reactivates Thea, who is also detained. Tessa then informs them that she will soon send Kalisk to Weyland-Yutani to be a research subject. Tessa believes Kalisk's super regeneration ability could be leveraged as a breakthrough in the medical world. Furthermore, Tessa thanks Thea for creating an opening that allowed Tessa to successfully capture Kalisk and Deck. Tessa then performs a painful experiment on Deck to investigate the abnormality in the predator's body size. Thea finally stops the experiment to protect Deck. Tessa now orders her subordinates to prepare to lock up Thea and then deactivate her for betrayal. As Tessa leaves, Thea follows Deck's direction to trick the monitoring synth. As a result, the synth is killed by Deck's weapon, which is actually a Yaoa children's toy. Seizing the opportunity, Thea rebels and successfully helps Deck escape alive. Deck then jumps into a waterfall to avoid pursuit by Tessa's team. After that, Deck manages to find his ship and uses medicine at the location to heal his wounds. Deck then searches the ship for a weapon because the one he used before was seized by Tessa. Unfortunately, Deck finds nothing because the weapons on the ship were also taken by Tessa. Deck finally takes a mask that seems to be a valuable heirloom left by Quay. Once his condition has recovered, Deck begins searching for a living creature on Genna that he can use as a weapon. Deck then chooses the sharp grass as a short-range weapon and selects the acid-spitting creature as a long-range weapon. Afterward, Dek returns to the facility where he recovered his leg. Dek then accidentally finds Bud. From there, Dek finds evidence that Bud is actually the child of the captured Kalisk. Soon after, Dek frees Thea's leg, which is trapped. It turns out Thea's leg can now operate normally. Therefore, Dek uses Thea's leg to track Thea's location. Time continues until the leg guides Dek to the Weyland-Yutani base on Genna, the location of Thea's detention. Dek then uses the acid spray to kill one synth unit. After that, Dek manages to kill several synths thanks to the distraction created by Thea's leg. While dispersed, Dek, Bud, and Thea's leg successfully kill several synths in their respective ways. After eliminating the guard synths, Thea's leg successfully frees Thea and reunites with her. Dek actually saved Thea to repay her kindness. Upon meeting Thea, Dek informs her that Kalisk is Bud's mother. Dek then resolves to save Kalisk so she can live with her child again. Thea emphasizes that they must move fast because Kalisk is about to be transferred from the base to be sent to Weyland-Yutani. According to Dek's strategy, Thea fights to free Kalisk. In the process, Thea fails to unlock Kalisk's cage because her status as a member of Tessa's team has been revoked. Thanks to Bud's help, Thea kills the synth that was about to capture her. Thea then takes over the synth's eye to unlock the retina scan-based cage lock. At the same time, Dek, with his combined attacks, manages to kill many surrounding synths. Soon after, Dek confronts Tessa, who is operating a mech suit. It turns out Tessa uses the robot as a weapon to fight Dek. Meanwhile, Dek now shifts to making Tessa a trophy or prey in the Yaoa hunting tradition. While Dek is still fighting, Kalisk finally emerges and immediately attacks Tessa for revenge. Dek and Kalisk work together, and Tessa's robot is severely damaged by their combined assault. Cornered, Tessa tries to kill Kalisk with her stolen Yaoa laser weapon. But before she can act, Tessa is devoured by Kalisk. Once the situation is safe, Dek gives Kalisk a warm touch as a sign that he wants to make peace with the monster. Shortly after, Kalisk suddenly feels a disturbance before her body is shattered into pieces. It turns out this condition is triggered by Tessa, who can still attack while trapped inside Kalisk's body. Tessa then prepares to kill Thea with the Yaoa laser weapon. However, due to Dek's attack from behind, Tessa fails in her action and ends up paralyzed. Bud then rips off Tessa's head to kill her permanently. Sometime later, Dek returns to the planet Yaoa Prime in his repaired ship. Dek then meets Nyor in the sight of many Yaoa clan members. Dek finally asserts that he has completed his hunt by handing over Tessa's head as a trophy. As a reward for his success, Dek asks to be given a Yaoa device called a cloaking device, which can make the user's body invisible. However, Nyor refuses to acknowledge Dek's success. His reason is that Nyor considers Dek and Quay to be clan traitors. Nyor then orders 2 of his warriors to execute Dek. However, Dek successfully kills both warriors because he has become much stronger since leaving Yaoa Prime. Nyor finally fights Dek so he can execute his own son. At the climax of the fight, Dek defeats Nyor and removes his father's clan leader mask. From this, Nyor is finally able to acknowledge Dek's strength and allow him to become a clan member. However, Dek refuses because he already has a clan that accepts him. Soon after, the now-grown Bud appears and devours Nyor's head. Dek does not object to Bud's action as he wants revenge for his father's wickedness. It turns out Bud and Thea are now members of the clan led by Dek. In this final moment, Dek takes the cloaking device from Nyor's severed hand. Seconds later, the clan members prepare to attack Dek to punish his actions. To make matters worse, Dek also has to face his mother, who arrives in a large ship, and the film finally ends. So, what did you think of the movie? Leave it in the comments below, and if you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe for more movie recaps. See you in the next video.